Hey there, my friend. I'm genuinely glad you're here watching, and if you hit that subscribe button, it'd honestly make my whole day. Let's get into it. The sun filtered gently through the glass roof above the country club's garden terrace, casting golden light across the mimosas on every table. The soft clinking of glasses blended seamlessly with the lazy elegance of jazz floating through the warm summer air. It all spoke of money, of cultivated leisure. Loretta's laughter rang out, sugary and sharp, a blade wrapped in silk. "He's generous, sure," she said, swirling her champagne. "But there's no fire left." The twist? Her husband of 23 years, Mark Belling, sat just 3 seats away. He didn't even blink. That was his move. No reaction, no rebuttal, just stillness. The kind that didn't signal surrender, but rather a man drained by the long, slow drip of quiet contempt. Around him, Loretta's curated circle of friends sipped and smirked, women who performed camaraderie like a cabaret act, their laughter more about control than connection. Not one of them looked at Mark, not a flicker. In that world, the loyal husband was just another background fixture, reliable, invisible, taken for granted. But inside Mark, something had realigned. Earlier that morning, Loretta had kissed his cheek, asked him to wear the navy blazer she always liked, said it mattered to her that he come along, that it might be a fresh start. And now here she was, turning him into a punchline. Without a word, Mark set his utensils down. He dabbed the corners of his mouth with a cloth napkin and folded it precisely, just as he used to fold contracts in his old office days. He paid the full tab, no fuss, no division. Then he rose, not for drama, but as a statement. Loretta didn't even notice until his presence disappeared behind her. She glanced up, mildly confused, then resumed her storytelling. But something shifted. The laughter dimmed, tinged now with discomfort. The atmosphere grew taut, sensing something invisible but significant had snapped. Mark left quietly like a spirit slipping back into flesh. The valet, picking up on the unspoken weight of the moment, straightened. A sleek black vintage Jaguar coasted up the driveway, its engine a low, familiar growl. Behind the wheel was Elise, mid-30s, aviators on, serene as ever. Her smile didn't shout freedom. It whispered finally. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry, just gave a nod. Mark climbed in, calm and assured, as though he'd been waiting for that exact moment all his life. They drove in silence, not hollow but purposeful. That night, Mark checked into a hotel downtown. No drama, just a gym bag, his shaving kit, and a thick gray folder in his mind labeled nuclear option. This wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was preparation. The long-expected pivot of a man who'd known, deep down, that this day would come. Outside his window, the city pulsed under soft lights. His phone vibrated. 10 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 1 text. "Where are you? Are you okay?" He read it the way you might glance at a credit card offer, coldly detached. She didn't want the truth. She wanted control. He powered the phone down. By the next morning, Mark stepped into his office wearing a tailored suit he hadn't touched in years. He hadn't been fired. He requested leave, a sabbatical. The HR rep approved it before he could finish the sentence. That's what people forget about quiet men. They seem unchanging until they change everything. By lunch, his calendar was clear. By night, he was someone else. He hired Vic, a blunt, broad-shouldered ex-Marine turned trainer. Vic took one look at Mark's orthopedic loafers and tossed them. "Stand like you mean it," he said. Mark did. His wardrobe transformed, intentional, sharp, never flashy. He swapped his barber for a stylist who erased a decade with a single cut. "Your wife's gonna flip," she joked. Mark didn't correct her. His mornings began at 5. Workouts, clean meals, reading. He wasn't driven by rage, but by precision. A steady, cold-eyed rebuild. Loretta's messages kept arriving, irritation turning to confusion, then fear. Mark said nothing. He didn't need to. He was discovering the quiet strength in holding your ground without words. He never shouted. That had always been Loretta's weapon, volume and theater. Mark was methodical, silent. Even Elise didn't know everything. Not because he was hiding, but because he was finally writing a chapter that didn't start with pain. Then came the moment. 4 weeks in, elbows greasy from tinkering on a battered Maserati, Elise slid beneath the car beside him. She handed him a wrench. "Still got that calm?" she asked, like she was checking the temperature of his soul. Mark turned toward her, his face streaked with oil, and laughed. Not out of amusement, but because something deep inside had finally shaken loose. Then he kissed her, not to possess, but to prove he could still feel. Elise didn't question, didn't press. And that's what he cherished most, her quiet acceptance. But that evening, as Springsteen crackled softly from the old garage jukebox, Mark finally spoke. "I think she cheated." Elise didn't flinch. Her silence invited him to continue. "She called it passion," he said, "but it was just her running away. Too many yoga retreats, too many pop-up weekends in Santa Barbara, always coming home smelling like hotel soap." He remembered the moment it clicked. No lipstick stain, no teary confession, something worse. He was on their shared laptop just trying to order wine for their anniversary. She hadn't logged out. He never snooped. But something felt off, so he clicked. Just a few emails from someone named Tyler, saved under Tea Yoga. Subject line, "Last night still tastes like you." 3 sentences. A vivid recollection of a Tesla's back seat like it was some holy place. Mark stared for 10 minutes. Reread it a dozen times. He didn't throw the laptop, didn't scream. He closed it, made dinner, set the table. Because part of him had already let go. And detachment? That's sharper than anger. It cuts deeper. What Loretta never realized, still doesn't, is that he saved it all. Backed up the emails, traced the money, her boutique, empire, built entirely on his silent support, quiet funding. Not for ego, for partnership. She rewrote that story, told everyone a different version. And that's what stung more than the affair. It was the erasure of him. When he found the transaction, $26,000 drained from his personal account, months before her launch, he understood. Payback couldn't be loud. It had to be surgical. And Elise? She didn't say a word. Just sat with him, steady as bedrock. The kind of presence that makes a man believe there's more life ahead. No judgment, just resolve. A few days passed, and she placed a folder in his hands. Documents stacked inside, permits for restoration, legal paperwork, LLC registration. She needed someone to share ownership, mostly for insurance purposes. "Only if you're absolutely certain," she said quietly. He didn't pause. He signed immediately. She wasn't a distraction, she was a mirror. Together, they brought the Maserati back to life. And in doing so, pieced Mark together again. Every bolt they tightened rewrote a chapter of his history he once avoided touching. But while Mark was rebuilding, Loretta's world began to fracture. The neighbors stopped waving. Her tennis crew began ignoring her messages. Janet, once her most reliable brunch companion, showed up late one Sunday and barely met her eyes before offering a weak excuse. That was the moment it clicked. The secret was out. What once lived as quiet shame had become social currency, the latest gossip circulating in whispers. The scandal wasn't just about what she said. It was about whom she said it about. Mark had earned quiet respect, not flashy, but rock solid. The sort of man who fixed a neighbor's leaking roof during a storm while his wife browsed boutique candles. The kind who walked the old man's Labrador after a nasty fall, who kept showing up, even as his wife slowly erased him, and she had discarded him like an afterthought. Now the women who once envied her seemingly flawless marriage were backing away. Reputations rarely shatter in one dramatic blow. They erode slowly, silently. And Mark? He hadn't said a single word. That silence broke weeks later. She reached out. Emails, missed calls, voicemails, thick with apology. Nothing stirred him. So she played her final card. A reservation at the restaurant they used to love. One last attempt at sentiment. He never showed. Instead, the waiter approached with a silver tray, atop which sat an envelope. Inside was a photo, grainy, unposed. Mark, smiling, beside the fully restored Maserati. Elise beside him, her hand resting naturally at his hip. They weren't trying. They were just happy. Behind the picture, a copy of the cashier's check that had funded her boutique. No dramatic message, just one sharp line written in black ink. You said there was no passion, you were right, but it wasn't mine that was missing. She left the restaurant in a red dress that now felt like too much, too tight, too loud, too desperate. The next morning, she tried logging into their joint bank account. Access denied. By that afternoon, a thick legal envelope appeared. Business accounts, closed, co-ownership titles, removed. Mark hadn't shouted, hadn't fought. He just vanished, systematically, silently. Loretta wasn't simply alone. She was exposed. And he had done it with surgical precision. Once, she owned every room she entered. Her heels, her laughter, her curated elegance, they shielded her. But now, the women who once orbited her like satellites looked through her as if she'd disappeared. She told herself it was a phase. Spring always skewed the boutique's rhythm. Customers got flaky. Then her assistant mentioned, tentatively, that several supplier payments were overdue. Loretta brushed it off, blamed a delayed accountant. But her assistant's raised brow said everything. The flowers stopped coming too. The weekly deliveries, always anonymous, ceased. She used to imagine they came from a secret admirer. They never were. They were from Mark. Every bouquet. Then came the final blow. Pamela Gregory cut ties. Her most valued client, a woman she had styled through countless events and renovations. The message came cold in a standard font. Restructuring my plans, best of luck. Translation, you're no longer useful. Pamela, one of Mark's referrals. Everything Loretta had built, the favors, the recommendations, the whispered name-dropping, had been silently underpinned by Mark's reputation. Without him, she wasn't a tastemaker. She was just another boutique owner drowning in debt, barely holding her brand together. The hospital gala that Saturday confirmed it. She arrived late wearing a backup dress. Her preferred one hadn't been returned by the tailor. Unpaid balance. People looked at her briefly. Some nodded. No one smiled. No one offered her a glass of champagne. She stood at the edges, overlooked and unnecessary. Then Amanda Keene walked over, owner of a newer, sharper boutique uptown, always watching, always calculating. Amanda leaned in at the bar. If you're going to drag someone's name through the mud, make sure the room isn't full of people who liked him better, she whispered. Loretta straightened. I'm sorry, what? Amanda just sipped her wine. You humiliated a man half this city quietly respects. What did you think would happen? That we'd clap? She turned and walked away without another glance. Something shifted. Not panic, clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. Mark hadn't stormed out, he hadn't yelled or destroyed anything. He had simply removed himself from the equation, leaving her nothing and no one to point to. That night she left another voicemail. Her voice trembled now. Mark, it's me. I think we should talk. I miss you. Click. No reply. The next morning another courier arrived. Another legal notice, formal separation of business assets. Then another, removal from their shared bank access. She ran to check the account. Access denied. She called the bank. I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name is no longer listed on this account. Her hands shook. She grabbed the Visa card they'd used for 20 years and attempted to place an order on her supplier portal. Declined. She threw her phone across the room. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't vindictive. It was methodical, calm, unflinching. Mark hadn't lashed out. He had quietly extracted himself from every part of her world. The boutique was still hers, entirely hers. And now, so were the bills, the supplier threats, the past due notices. Mark was gone. And no one was coming to help her recover. Because she had become that woman. The one who ridiculed the man who made her world stable. And Mark? He hadn't just left. He had evolved. It started with murmurs. A gala flyer listed him as keynote speaker for the Autumn Grace Foundation. It had to be a mistake. Mark hated public speaking. But there it was, printed in gold serif type. Mark Willen, entrepreneur, philanthropist. She didn't RSVP. Women like her never RSVP'd. They simply arrived. So she did. That Friday, she walked into the venue in a striking new red gown, tight around the ribs, hair flawless, posture perfect. But inside, She was hollow. She overheard the whispers. About the Maserati featured in the silent auction. About the anonymous donor who'd single-handedly transformed the foundation's finances. About the man now commanding attention just by being in the room. Somehow, he was everywhere. Then the lights lowered, and he stepped onto the stage. Mark, dressed in a sleek black tuxedo, no tie, no hesitation, composed. And beside him, Elise, graceful, poised, wearing a dark blue dress that didn't demand attention. It whispered strength. Loretta's fingers dug into her clutch as applause broke out around them. She didn't join in, didn't even blink. Mark approached the microphone. "Good evening, I'm Mark Belling. For more than 20 years, I built things. For other people, quietly, carefully. But one day I realized I wasn't creating a future. I was constructing a cage." The room fell into silence. Behind him, a screen flickered to life. Images of him and Elise working on the Maserati, oil on their hands, genuine laughter, no posing, no performance, just authenticity. His voice remained even. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it's the silence over dinner. Sometimes it's being called safe when what they mean is forgettable, but in time you understand. Being quiet doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're waiting. Loretta's breath hitched. The applause was thunderous, but inside her there was only a crushing stillness, because this wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about Elise, or money. It was about what Mark had become. He'd gone from invisible to undeniable. Outside, the night air carried soft perfume, light laughter, and the gentle clinking of glasses. Loretta stood beneath hanging lights, the hem of her red gown sweeping across the polished stone. Her heartbeat pounded, not from rage, not from envy, but from fear. For the first time, she knew. No one was coming back. The Maserati shimmered by the valet, still and bold like a statement. Not loud, not ostentatious, simply deserved. Mark emerged first, hand in hand with Elise. No showmanship, just quiet connection. He didn't rush, didn't flinch. Loretta stepped forward before she even realized it. "Mark, wait," she called. He turned slowly, not irritated, not surprised, just still. The nearby murmurs faded, not from curiosity, but from respect. "That's not what I meant," she said, her voice fracturing despite her control. Mark met her gaze, not unkind, not harsh, just resolved. "No," he replied gently. "It's exactly what you meant." She faltered. Her breath caught in her throat. Mark nodded once to Elise, opened the door for her, and walked to the driver's side. He never glanced back. The engine came alive, the headlights slicing through the night as they disappeared into it. Loretta remained motionless, surrounded by people in designer suits who no longer saw her. What hurt most wasn't who stood at his side. It was the calm on his face. Back home, Loretta unraveled. Not in fury, but in fear. The boutique was hemorrhaging cash. Clients vanished. Even her assistant lingered over lunch and left early. She dialed old friends, the ones who once sought her style advice. Now they answered coldly, if at all. One night, she sat on the staircase, staring at the last cardigan Mark had left by the coat hook. She reached for her phone, called again, straight to voicemail. She didn't bother hiding her voice anymore. "I miss you," she whispered. "Please." No response. The final blow arrived not with drama, but with precision. Another envelope, hand-delivered. Inside, a single-page form. Her name removed from the deed. The house he had paid off quietly over years, while she threw wine nights and hosted wellness circles. Now she hadn't just lost him, she had lost the foundation itself, and the world spun on, like she'd never existed. At exactly 9:13 a.m., the last envelope appeared. No red ink, no warning. Just a pristine ivory envelope, handed over by a man in a suit who didn't wait for a tip. Loretta looked at it like it might detonate. Inside, a formal invite. Autumn Grace Foundation Gala and Silent Auction. Keynote speaker, Mark Belling. Her name was nowhere. No option to RSVP. No +1. It wasn't an invitation. It was a message. She wore her boldest gown that night, crimson again, because she believed it still gave her gravity. She walked into the Belvedere Hall like royalty. But this time, no heads turned. She wasn't presence. She was memory. The ballroom buzzed with joy and admiration, but none of it belonged to her. She floated along the perimeter like a guest at her own wake. Then the lights dimmed once more. Mark stepped up, this time not as anyone's husband, not a footnote, not a joke, but a visionary. Sometimes, he said, we build lives so carefully that we don't see we've built a cell. And the worst prisons wear velvet and gold because they're soft enough to make you stay. No names, no accusations. But every sentence landed sharper than any scream. Behind him, the screen displayed moments again. The car, the lease, the garage, the oil-stained hands. The joy. Not romantic love, but a love for rediscovery. Loretta sat frozen, her wine untouched, her fingers locked around the stem. Because this wasn't about loss. This was about flight. When the event ended, she waited near the valet, not hoping, needing, a glance, a word, something. Instead, she saw Mark open the car door for Elise again. Not for effect, but because that was who he had always been. Still, she approached. "Mark," she said, softer this time. "Can we talk?" He paused, looked at her, not with fury, not with sorrow, just quiet. "You already said everything," he told her. "I just finally got quiet enough to hear it." Then he walked away. No outburst, no retort, no need for a final word. Loretta remained in a sea of scent and influence, but entirely alone. She had called him dull, predictable, lacking spark, but she had been wrong. He never lacked anything. She had simply stopped seeing him. Now the world saw him, and she became a tale no one dared repeat. A caution buried in silk. A woman who thought she could belittle the quiet man, only to watch him rebuild, brighter and stronger, without her, better than she ever imagined. And so our story finds its end. If it moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching. And if you'd like more stories like this, explore the channel. Until next time, dear friend.